Yeah, but it's. Cross street.
The camera says, oh.
One part gets.
Gary.
Reach out.
So that's I regret.
I'll give you the high.
What? But my contact.
Thank you, everyone. Really? Okay, we should choose this.
That's why I felt.
Hello? Okay. Are we have an echo again? We okay? A little bit. Is that better? Can people? We should put this over here. Or this one has no. Put this over here. It shouldn't be causing anything. People still coming in the waiting room? Coming into the attendance? No, in the upper right, you see it looks good. All right, we're gonna get started. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. If not, please go on the Q&A function and send us a note that you're having trouble hearing, but I think we're good and everyone in the room can hear. Excellent, thank you. I can hear myself echoing, so good. Hi, my name is Howard Libet. I'm the Executive Director of the Baltimore Jewish Council. On behalf of BJC, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Before I introduce tonight's speaker, please indulge me for a moment while I thank our partners at the Inside Israel Forum and the Associated. We're honored to partner with the Inside Israel Forum to bring you this program. For those who aren't familiar with the forum, it aims to provide opportunities for Jewish Baltimore to enhance its knowledge, understanding, and relationship to Israel. Community leaders grapple with evolving ideas of Israel and how it factors into their Jewish identity, social activism, and current events. A special thank you to Sarah Jacobs for her partnership with the forum, as well as the forum's three co-chairs, Dinah Greenwald, Gary Olshansky, and Tammy Hayden. Of course, the work of the Baltimore Jewish Council and the work of the forum are only possible thanks to the amazing support of the Associated. The Associated's annual campaign for 2023 just launched. It's just launching into high gear now. And if you've not yet made your pledge, please consider doing so to enable us to continue to bring you programs just like this one. The Associated also makes possible the work of our partner agencies like the JCC, which is kind enough to provide a space for programs like tonight. This April, the Associated is offering an opportunity to celebrate Israel's 75th birthday and the Associated's 100th birthday through a milestone mission to Israel. It should be an amazing trip. If you're interested, we're happy to provide more information. Send me an email or let us know online or let us know after the program tonight. Now, let me turn to tonight's program and a speaker who many of you are familiar with here in Baltimore. There is multiple appearances in the last couple of years. Gil Hoffman is the Executive Director of HonestReporting.com. Previously, he served as Chief Political Correspondent and Analyst for the Jerusalem Post for nearly 25 years. Well connected to Israeli and Palestinian leaders, he's interviewed every major figure across the Israeli political spectrum, has been interviewed by top media on 6 continents, and is a regular analyst on CNN, Al Jazeera, and other news outlets. Raised in Chicago, graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern School of Journalism or for the Miami Herald and Arizona Republic before moving to Israel. The fact that I think is coolest that he reminds me of is that he has lectured in every major English-speaking country in the world, more than half the Canadian provinces, and recently completed by appearing in Hawaii. He has now lectured about Israel in all 50 US states. He lives with his family in Jerusalem. Having heard Gil speak a number of times about Israeli politics, I know we're in for a real treat tonight. After he speaks, we should have some time for questions, both the people here in the room, as well as those online. Please send your questions via the Q&A, and we will let our virtual audience participate too. With that, turn it over to Gil. Thank you. I get the intro right?
I think you did. And thank you so much to Howard, to all the sponsors, to all the organizers, and to all the people that came both physically and those of us who are here watching, but are really here in their hearts, but are not wearing shoes like we are. And enjoy the comfort of your home. And so Howard, the only thing you left out is that my most important thing in my bio is that I'm married to Maayan, who was the editor of the Baltimore Jewish Times and the executive here at the Associated, and it's the best thing that ever came out of Baltimore.
I didn't want everyone to think he was riding off her coattail.
I'll continue to ride. And now she is very successful in Israel, where she has 8 full-time jobs. And they all think that she is working full-time only for them, I think. And I think that the fact that she keeps that up and that works is pretty darn amazing, because she probably does do more as for each of them in her 8 full-time jobs than any regular human does in one. So miracles can happen in the Middle East. So we are here at a time where we're looking ahead a week away from an election in Israel. It will be our 5th in under 4 years. And nothing puts that, I think, into perspective better than my daughter, who is going to turn 6 the day after the election. And if you count the race for mayor and which had a runoff race, she's actually going to be voting a 7th time before she turns 6. I bring her along with me to vote. She puts the piece of paper in the envelope. She's very good at it by now. We have in Israel very cyber-proof elections. We go from being this startup nation to being the low-tech nation when we put a little piece of paper in an envelope and put it into a box and have it counted by actual human beings. She has become the expert on voting at that age. And the last time I took her to vote, she looked around when we were parking and she said, "Daddy, where's the water?" And I said, "What water are you looking for?" And she said, "Aren't you taking me on a boat?" And I said, "No, we're going to vote." She said, "But Daddy, we always vote." "Well, when are you going to take me on a boat?" And sure enough, after the government was formed, I took her to a boat ride a couple times, but now she's going to have to vote again. And at least this time, after we vote, I won't be working quite as hard, having left the Jerusalem Post after 24 whole years in June. It was an accomplishment to leave the Knesset after more than 20 years working there without an indictment. You're laughing, but the other 3 people who've left recently after more than 20 years left with an indictment. So it really was an achievement. The day after my last day of work, I met over breakfast with my friend Jonathan Pollard, and I said to him, "Hey, you got out after 30 years. I got out after 24. It was up late that night, the night before my last day of work, because the government fell apart. I worked until 11:59 p.m. and 59 seconds that night. I went out with a bang. This Zoom and physical audience, the physical audience gets to see it closer. That's what you get for putting on shoes. You get the prize of getting to see visual aids closer. The last article I wrote for the Jerusalem Post was Israel going to elections, and Yair Lapid becoming the Prime Minister of Israel. And this was very symbolic that I wrote about the government falling apart because I had a small role in the government being formed. I'll take you back in history. when an Israel speaker says they'll take you back in history, they usually mean 3,000 years. You'll have to settle for 10. In August 2012, there was an election for the leadership of a small party called BYUD. And there were two people running who were over the age of 70 and one young guy in his 40s named Naftali Bennett, who I'd gotten to know pretty well before when he worked for Netanyahu. But we had decided that when he would be in Jerusalem, we'd sit and talk for a while. And so after he had a debate against his competition, we just sat outside in the cool August Jerusalem night air, talking about the future. He said he'd be prime minister one day. I said, yeah, right. And he asked me a question. He said, do you know Yair Lapid? Well, Lapid had been an anchorman on TV until 3 weeks earlier when he had entered politics. And the previous Friday, I had a get to know you meeting with him at his house in Tel Aviv. He's got this man cave in the basement. He worships Muhammad Ali. And so I said to Bennett, not only do I know Lapid, but from my experience with him, I think you guys would make very good friends. And he said, really? Could I have his phone number? And so I gave the phone number of Lapid to Bennett, kind of led to the government that we have today, in which they both served as prime minister. Now, we believe in Judaism that if you make 3 matches, 3 shidduchs, then you automatically get into heaven. Well, I have made 1 political match. And I'm told if I make 2 more, I go straight to heaven. So this government will have a challenge now in trying to keep going against Netanyahu. Who is not going anywhere. He is on Friday, he turned 73 years old. Happy birthday, Netanyahu. 73 years young. His father died at the age of 102. So he could still have 30 more years of politics going. And if he manages to pass the abolished death bill and eliminates death, then he could be our emperor for hundreds of years. And Netanyahu, I'll tell you a quick story. Here, during COVID, here in Baltimore, did your gyms close? Yeah, wasn't that annoying? Did they reopen gradually, like they did in Israel? Well, in Israel, I don't know what they're trying to prove, but when they reopened, it was like every other treadmill. And so there's a shortage of treadmills. And the gym I've been working out at for more than 20 years is the gym in the Knesset. And during all that time, I have never seen anyone permitted to run on those treadmills without headphones other than Netanyahu. And so Netanyahu, when he's running on that treadmill, he blasts his Fox News. You could hear him from a long way away. And so, right after COVID, with every other treadmill closed, there was a line. And he keeps running and running and running. And I started writing all the people who run against Netanyahu over the last 35 years. Gidon Saar, Yuli Edelstein, Barkat, Danon. And I write them, Netanyahu just won't get out of the way. He keeps on running. I finally know how you feel. So that's Phoebe for you. If during all my 24 years of covering politics, I have never seen a greater discrepancy between what politicians say publicly and privately. If you talk to Likud politicians publicly, especially before an election about Netanyahu, they sound like Christian evangelicals talking about Jesus. And if you speak to them privately and they trust, they sound like Christian evangelicals talking about the devil, no less. So this election is very much about him. I wish that our elections in Israel would be more like yours. You can laugh about it. But your elections are about issues. You have actual debates between candidates that they debate the economy for more than an hour. For me, living in Israel, that's just amazing. We haven't had a debate between all the candidates for prime minister since 1996. A debate in Israel is as foreign as a squirrel. It just, we don't have that. You guys are lucky. We have now a fifth election in a row that's nothing but a Shakespearean cliche that you've heard too many times of to be or not to be. That has been the only question. I wish our elections would be about war and peace and security and Iran, and the economy and the cost of living and religion and state. No, it's not about any of those things, just like the last election. And the last election, of course, concluded with not to be. And they got enough seats to form a government and block him from being prime minister, at least for a while. We'll soon find out for how long. That election really proved what the most powerful emotion in the world is. I would love to say that the most powerful emotion in the world is love, but it's not. I've covered politics for long enough to know that the most powerful emotion in the world is hate. And we thought hate would be enough to keep a government going for a while. It was only enough for a little bit more than a year. But we thought that would be enough of a glue to keep them together. Now, what brought down the outgoing government? It wasn't its diversity. Its diversity was its strength. What brought down the government was fake news. And I'm not just saying this as executive director of HonestReporting, I'll get back to that later. The government was brought down by fake news in that there were disturbances on the Temple Mount that were not that big a deal. Anything that happens up there gets magnified by the media. But there have been a lot worse times up there than there were in the disturbances this past April. But because you had an Arab party in the government for the first time, they had to pretend that it was a big deal, even though they knew it was not. And after they finished their little show, then the right had to also protest, and that kind of spiraled out of control. That's what led to the election we have right now. Not the diversity. The diversity is something that looked very good around the world. We had the most diverse government in the history of the state of Israel, possibly the most diverse government in the history of mankind on this planet. Having right wing and left wing and centers together, and LGBT and homophobic together, and very orthodox and anti-orthodox together. Be the equivalent if in America you had a government of AOC and Ted Cruz as co-presidents of the United States. You had the people who invaded the Capitol that day, including the guy in that Viking hat, join together with the squad and think, can't we all just get along and run this country based on what we have in common? That's basically what it was. And they had the hate in common and not much else. I oversimplified it with ABCs, it was for Abraham Accords. And they wanted to advance and for helping Israeli Arabs in an unprecedented kind of way to bridge the gaps between Jews and Arabs. C is for COVID. They're all against it. On that, B, of course, was for Bibi. So, but it really wasn't enough, even though it looked so good to the world. Wasn't it nice for a while to have a government that the world liked? Well, after the election next week, we might not. I mean, I'd say it's about a 50% chance that Netanyahu will come. Say it's about a 25% chance that somebody else somehow will form a government eventually before the next election. And about a 25% chance that we would go to a sixth election, which of course would make us look completely pathetic, but not as pathetic as England. And we at least have that on our side. You've got the change of the guard in the morning in England, and you've got the change of the guard in the Prime Minister's office every other day. So, not bad. We might have a situation where Netanyahu comes back to power and the media around the world declare us, if the word is regressive, is that a word? It's the opposite of progressive. Good. Thank you. So that's what they would say. And we have to be ready to explain if that happens, that it's just a matter of what Israelis care about most when they vote. All the polls, there've been covered 10 elections. The polls before the election, every election, when they've asked Israelis what they're voting on, the answer that they give more than anything before the election, they say they're voting on the economy, the cost of living. That's what they say. And then when they ask people in retrospect, what did you vote on? They say security. They always pretend that they're going to vote about the economy. And then they vote the opposite of what makes sense for them economically. The poor people vote for the Likud, which is a capitalist party that helps the rich at the expense of the poor. The rich people vote for Labor and other like-minded parties that helps the poor at the expense of the rich. It makes no sense economically. In the end, they're voting on security anyway. And Netanyahu, the more terrorist attacks there's going to be between now and the election, the more likely it is that he'll win. So the world might not like that very much. They also might not like it if you have a situation that would cause there being only 5 or 6 Arabs in the next Knesset, which could happen. We have our outgoing Knesset for you to say goodbye to. These are the people who thought they ran our country. And as you can see, there are 2 Arab parties represented here, one with 6 seats and one with 4. And so we have seen what's been happening with the Israeli Arabs in the Knesset. When they ran all together in one party, they won 15 seats. They had a 65% turnout. The Arab constituency likes unity within their ranks. When they ran last time with 2 parties, they had a 45% turnout. 65 down to 45 is a lot. And they, because of that, went down to only 10 seats. Well, now they're running in 3. Let's do some journalism major math. There are 1 million Arab voters. The minimum vote count to get in is 150,000. That's 150,000 times 3, I'm told, is 450,000, which is apparently 45% turnout. So right now they're expected to have turnout under 40%. They would need to have those 450,000 in order to all 3 somehow equally get the minimum number of votes to get in. Well, they're not going to have that. So we now know definitely one of the 3 won't make it in. And it is statistically possible some Zionist parties and you throw out the votes. So the other one, you could end up having only 1 party make it in, depending on what the turnout is. That's how you go down to having 6 seats or so for Arabs, down from 15 in a year and a half. And that would make Israel look terrible. And they will say about us that we are racist. And you know what? It's not true. We have Mansour Abbas in our outgoing government. I talked about the significance of this when this government was formed. I talked about that night on the Will Blitzer show on CNN about how open Israelis are to cooperating with an Arab party that doesn't talk about the Palestinian issue, that just wants to improve the lives of your ordinary Arab citizens. Did we suddenly become racist overnight? No, it doesn't make any sense. But you just watch. That's what they're going to say because of math. Especially if Netanyahu does form a government, and as he said again tonight, one of his ministers would be Itamar Ben-Gvir. Itamar Ben-Gvir is a person whose views have most of his life been over the line into extremist and racist. He called for expelling Arabs from Israel. He threatened Yitzhak Rabin's life before he was assassinated. Now he says he was wrong. He has moderated his views. Does he only say that because a political strategist told him to say that? We don't know. Politicians say a lot of things. But the fact is that the support for him only went up after he moderated his views, not because of him being extreme in the past. Anybody saying, including editors of very respected newspapers in Israel, saying that the rise of Ben-Gvir proves Israelis are racist is wrong. So why is there support for Ben-Gvir besides the fact that he moderated his views? Some political technicalities. Israelis on the right felt misled in the last government. A lot of them voted for Naftali Bennett and the Ayelet Shaked and Gidon Sa'ar and got what they believe is not right wing. And so they feel traumatized, and now they want to get real right wing. They want to order something in a restaurant and get what they paid for, as it says in their political ads. That makes sense. Other political realities are there's a security situation, and Ben-Gvir knew how whenever there was a terrorist attack that made people feel unsafe from the fear of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, he was there in the camera frame. He's very much a media creation that got disproportionate coverage. There's the religious phenomenon that's been going on for a number of years now, which is that ultra-Orthodox rabbis, one after another, have been passing away. And their successors do not command the same kind of blind adherence that they did, because they were around from before the Holocaust and from before the founding of the state of Israel in Africa and the Middle East. And they brought a certain aura that their successors cannot match. And so the ultra-Orthodox voters who were there more than there were before feel unshackled and can vote for somebody else. Ben-Gvir is Orthodox too, and he's also Sephardi. There's also ethnic politics in Israel. A lot of young Sephardi people in the periphery want to vote for someone who looks like them, and that is normal. Happens around the world. If there's any racism involved in the rise of Ben-Gvir, it is the racism of Sephardim against Ashkenazim, not against Arabs. No matter what you might read in respected newspapers around the world. So, yeah, all of these things, all three of these could end up making Israel look quite bad. And you guys know the truth. And it's important for that truth to get out there because this is an election in which we are still not hyperpolarized. We are not like America. In America, you have a wider gap between people than ever before. It's kind of icky to see what goes on here in America right now. I remember growing up here and people didn't know whether they lived in a red state or a blue state, and now the people from the other states and jealous of the people in the purple states and everything. We have more of a consensus on diplomatic, security, and economic issues than we have ever had before, even if we have fringes that receive a lot more coverage. So what will this election be decided by? By three things. Number one, is that electoral threshold. We said which parties will pass it and which parties won't, about 150,000 votes. A lot can happen. If you throw out 130,000 votes, it definitely shifts the political map in the next Knesset. The next thing that will decide this election is that Arab turnout, which has fluctuated in the past 4 elections from 49 to 59 to 65 to 45. Learned state numbers, you have to repeat them twice. 49 to 59 to 65 to 45. Think of it. That's a big fluctuation, especially if you consider that the Jewish turnout has been a very consistent flat line of 70%, which for me was amazing. Imagine the culture shock for me, coming from Chicago, where the turnout in the last election for mayor was only 23%. And half those people were dead. And the other half, of course, were voting twice. So here, 70% turnout in Israel. And also culture shock coming from a place with only one party, the Democratic Party, that's all, to a place where there are 40. And everything, of course, from the pirate party that believes in stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. You can follow me on Twitter. I retweeted their election ad today. It's entertaining. Of course, we have a men's rights party, more needed than ever. And the Greenleaf Party that believes the way to solve the Middle East conflict is to legalize marijuana and distribute it throughout the region for free, which is possibly the only thing that hasn't been tried, but still. So those parties make it a lot harder to do the math. Now, the last thing that will decide this election is the swing voters. Swing voters used to be easier to define who they are. Take it to the election of 1996. The 2 candidates were Netanyahu and Peres, and it was a very intense election. Everybody had a bumper sticker on their car telling people they were voting for. Everyone believed that if the other guy wins, we're all going to die. And so the voters who were swing voters are obviously in the center of the political map, and Netanyahu and Peres both tried to get them. Netanyahu's slogan in that election was Netanyahu, Sim Shalom Batuach, Netanyahu making peace in a secure kind of way. Peres' slogan was Israel Chazaka, Chazaka in Peres, Israel strong with Peres. Of course, peace, not a word generally associated with Netanyahu, strength, not a word associated with Peres. And they tried to get the votes in the center in the closest race in Israel's history. The last election we had a year ago, also the swing voters were obvious. Of course, they weren't right and left the camps. They were the to Bibi and not to Bibi camp. And every party leader joined one side, except for one, Naftali Bennett, who, like my kids, refused to go to camp. And that's how he got to be prime minister, by being the one who holds the balance of power, could decide on his own who the prime minister would be and decide on himself, even though he had 6 seats. So that worked great for him. How many party leaders now in this election have not affiliated themselves with one side or the other? 0. How many? Y'all know a lot of Israelis, right? Do you know anyone who doesn't have an opinion on Netanyahu? So the amount of swing voters in this election is also among the 7 million voters, probably close to none. So if we don't have swing voters, what we have are what I call stability voters. Stability voters are people whose top priority in the election, with all due respect to their other views, is to end the political chaos. They think that Israel looks horrible to the world. They want to look better. They're humiliated. And these stability voters are also divided. There are those among them who say, I don't like Netanyahu, I don't want him to stay in power, but I'm just going to vote for him anyway this time. because I'm sick of elections and he can form the most stable government. And that's why the campaign billboards throughout Israel right now, with a picture of Netanyahu saying Netanyahu for 4 years of stability. Now, there are also plenty of stability voters who are on the other side who say he's the problem. He's the reason why we've gone to so many elections. A majority of the people on this piece of paper agree with Netanyahu's policies on diplomatic, security, and economic issues. A majority of the people on this piece of paper want him to go. The majority of the people in the country agree with his policies, and a majority of the country, nevertheless, want him to go. That is the problem, and so they would do whatever possible to replace him. And so I'll give you this scenario, is that Isaac Herzog, it's his first chance to pick a prime minister as president. By law, he can choose any one of the members of Knesset to form a government. By tradition, the presidents choose the guy who got the most recommendations from the leaders, the guy who is the leader of the largest camp, and the guy who is usually the leader of the largest party. Well, all three of those, unless something really drastic happens, all three of those are Netanyahu. And if he doesn't get 61 out of 120, after his 4 weeks are done, that's it, he's failed. And then Herzog would then ask Lapid to form a government. And all indications are that he would fail. And then there's a few weeks left before an election would automatically be initiated. During that time, there'll be negotiations. Benny Gantz, as the defense minister, would ask the ultra-Orthodox, do you want to keep Lapid and the finance minister of Victor Lieberman, who's done so much to hurt you in power, or do you want to join? I might not be Netanyahu, but you like me more than Lapid and Lieberman, let me form a government. And so that is the possibility that could technically work. And so I'm standing by 50% Netanyahu, 25% another election with Lapid staying on as prime minister, and 25% Gantz, who could be rewarded for successfully winning a war against the Slavic Jihad in August as defense minister. Now, how do we really win that war? The answer is the idea, finally kind of under duress, realized that the way to win a war on the military battlefield is to win it first on the media battlefield. It took a long time for them to realize there are too many agonizing examples in the past. I'll give just one. Do you remember how in the war last May 2021, Israel destroyed the Associated Press tower in Gaza? Everybody around the world knew because we gave them an hour to evacuate the building and in the same hour to film it from every possible angle. To make Israel look just terrible. Only 2 months after the war, did we reveal, oh, by the way, that was the Hamas cyber tower. By then, nobody was paying any attention at all. That could have happened again in this war. What happened was there were unfortunately children who were harmed and killed in the Jabalia refugee camp, and a security cabinet meeting was happening at that exact same time. And so the head of Southern Command, Eliezer Toledano, was at that meeting, and he said to the ministers, don't worry, we didn't do it, and we approved that we didn't do it. And because of a state comptroller's report from the past about past mistakes, in every meeting of the security cabinet sits the head of public relations in the prime minister's office, who now is a guy named Lior Hayat, who until a few months ago had the cushy job of consul general in Miami and the Caribbean. Possibly the best job in the world. So after the general says, don't worry, we didn't do it, we have proof, the diplomat says to him, okay, then let me go tell the world. And the general says, no, of course not. We've got to investigate this properly. We've got to make sure we don't hurt any of our own operations. This could take a couple months. And he gets up to leave. And the diplomat screams at the general, Shiv miyad. Sit immediately. And everyone around the room is shocked that the consul general screamed at a general. It's never happened before. Then the ministers start saying, wait a second, he's right. We really do have to release this to the world. And the diplomat beat the general, and that's how we won the war. It could have dragged on, but instead, we won. And that's been true all along. There are three battles going on for Israel's existence. There's one on the military battlefield, obviously we have an advantage. There's one on college campuses, obviously we're at a great disadvantage. Then there's the media one, which is the fairest fight. It's an uphill battle, but if we play it right, we can succeed. And that's why, even though I love my job in the Knesset, I had a front row seat in the gallery overlooking all the chaos. The taxpayers paid for my gym. I decided I had to take this opportunity to become the executive director of Honest Reporting and be the general leading the fight in the international media. And I expanded it to social media too for Israel. And it's been a blast. I started my job on the 1st of July. I've so far gotten 5 anti-Semitic journalists fired, including 3 from the New York Times. It's been wonderful. The day after the war, I said to my team, who are these people who covered the war for the mainstream media outlets in Gaza? Gaza has no freedom of the press, being controlled by Hamas. And so they looked into it. And about 20 minutes after I asked them to look into it, I hear from downstairs where my team sits, oh my God, Adolf Hitler. And I've got a view of the door. I made sure that there wasn't anybody coming in. But sure enough, yeah, they found that the guy who covered the war for the New York Times posted pictures admiring Hitler. He no longer works for the New York Times. And then I got a meeting with Patrick Kingsley, the bureau chief, a couple of weeks later, where he was very complimentary. He said, you and I are both in the truth-telling business, and you guys handle the journalism better than we did at the New York Times. Very nice of him to say. He said, you deserve credit for vetting better than we did with that guy. And I said, it wasn't just one guy, it was 3. What? I said, yeah, about an hour before I left to this meeting, I asked my team, check out other people in the New York Times. See if any of them also have anything to tell the world about. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, I hear from downstairs, oh my God, Adolf Hitler. Another one, a videographer had done some anti-Israel reports for the New York Times, had posted support for Hitler on social media in Arabic. And then right before I left to the restaurant, they found Hossam Salem. Hossam Salem is a photographer in Gaza, and he did not post pictures of Hitler, but he did praise some pretty nasty terrorist attacks that killed dozens of Jews, Christians, and Muslims. He wrote how excited and happy he was about the terrorist attack in Har Nof in Jerusalem, in which terrorists went into a synagogue and opened fire and started stabbing people, which was the inspiration for Pittsburgh and Poway and Copenhagen and New Zealand that killed hundreds of Muslims, Christians, and Jews. And so he no longer works at the New York Times either, and he's not very happy about that. He started a campaign on social media against us on Yom Kippur. He got more than 50,000 likes when he wrote on Yom Kippur about how there's poor Palestinian journalists who merely expressed opposition to the occupation and are now being silenced because of the evil Israel lobby. And then he got support from the most anti-Israel political cartoonist in the world, La Truth. And I made their cartoon bigger. I posterized it. It shows the evil Israel lobby shooting at the poor journalists like Osam Salem, Katie Halper, who we brought down from the Hill. You look pretty scary, right? The Israel lobby that was honest reporting. The fifth that we brought down was last week, a woman named Shanta Hamad, who was due to receive this month the top prize from the Thomson Reuters Foundation, $5,000, which is a lot for a Palestinian in her 20s. Was going to be on a panel with Christian Amanpour. But her social media all over praise for Hitler, how much she wants to be Hitler one day, how much she wants to sleep with Hitler. I don't know how you do that. How she wants to exterminate all the Jews. And so she is not getting that prize and not getting to meet Miss Amanpour. She lost her job at the Middle East Eye, which is a website that's not very fair to Israel anyway. We since then have been attacked by Hamas. Has a video against us, against Honest Reporting, where they show our newsroom, a little scary, and Iran. Iran has a channel called Press TV, propaganda channel in English, and he did a full half-hour show behind Honest Reporting. And what picture do they show of me? The picture that I talked about at the beginning of me holding my little girl. And she put the vote in the envelope. That summarizes me very well. I think they did a great job of summarizing me, but it was intended to threaten me, I guess. We will keep on going strong. I'll end with just telling you what the analysis said in this Iranian show. They said that the reason why this is all happening is because the Zionist regime has its backs against the wall and is about to crumble. And I dare say it is the opposite. It is the Iranian regime that has its back against the wall. The people there are protesting. They deserve to have better lives. They deserve to have a regime that cares more about helping its own people than about destroying ours. Its days are numbered. Whereas the people of Israel and the state of Israel are going to continue to succeed and thrive and win Am Yisrael.
Thank you so much, Gil Hoffman, for this incredible insight. It's so amazing to have your wise and very funny words. So thank you so much for being with us and for sharing. We're happy now to open it up for Q&A. I will ask that anyone in the room just raise your hand and we will go back and forth between those who are joining us on Zoom and writing in questions and in the room. And Gil, if you'll just repeat the questions into the mic so that everyone at home can be clear about what we're talking about. So would anyone like to kick us off?
May I have a glass of water or a bottle of water?
Yes. Anna? Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people talk about the election next week, and they've all called it a battle for Israel's soul, except you. So I'm wondering if you would also call it that, and what your thoughts are.
No, would not call it that. I think they are exaggerating. Our soul's going to be okay, no matter what people vote for. I mean, even those people, they're not saying it's a problem of Israelis being right wing. I think there's an understanding that Israel tried to make peace over and over again. I was there wearing a uniform when Israel withdrew from Gaza, and we were so hopeful at the time that you'd have like white doves go over that fence. After that, instead we got missiles and rockets and incendiary kites and everything, mortars. And that is the kind of thing that makes Israelis not think that peace is around the corner. So even those people who are worried about our soul understand that Israelis have moved rightward, and there's nothing wrong with that. they're worried about us selling our souls to actual racists. And I think the evidence is against that. And I think that the people who don't see that, they're ignoring political realities in order to prove some kind of point against Israel, and they're wrong.
We have one, let me go to ask you from one online. It's from someone who's a big fan of my aunt, your wife, Matthew. A lot of people remember working with her here and misses her very much.
I miss her very much.
His question is whether Yair Lapid's UN speech endorsing the two-state solution seems to have helped him and his party electorally, as presumably he hoped it would.
If you could repeat it.
So the question is about the Prime Minister Yair Lapid's speech to the United Nations, in which he endorsed the two-state solution, whether that helped him out politically in this election. I'd like to remind people that he also endorsed the two-state solution when Biden was speaking in Israel. He's endorsed it many times before. I understand that it was seen as a political move to take votes away from labor and Meretz and try to build his party up at their expense. It appears that the strategy of Lapid is to try to get it as close as possible that we could in order to try to persuade the president to give him the first chance to form a government instead of Netanyahu, because his bloc cannot compare and the recommendations will not compare. But being the leader of the largest party certainly could make him more of a player. So I understand that that would be the strategy. I don't know if that's the intended strategy, but it didn't change anything, what he said at the UN. But he gave a nice speech, and I think that any notion that there was in Israel that Netanyahu is the only one who knows how to speak to the world, Bennett and Lapid both prove they know how to do it too.
Go back to the room.
People should say their name before they ask a question.
Mitch, what can Israel do to be less fragmented? The 150,000 to get seats, is that a number worth increasing? So there's less parties, less fragmentation within the voting system.
Okay, so the question is about electoral reform. The reason why the electoral threshold was raised to 3.25% of the vote, which is the equivalent of slightly less than 150,000 votes, was because Avigdor Lieberman wanted there to be fewer Arabs in the Knesset at the time. Right now, he focuses more on the ultra-Orthodox, but back then he was campaigning against the Arabs, and he thought that it would make the threshold so high that Arabs wouldn't be able to get in, and then they united in part because of him. And really showed it to him. I mean, I don't see them raising the threshold even higher. Anyway, they've seen how parties just end up running together anyway. So it hasn't made them less fragmented. They're just as fragmented. They're just making tactical kind of deals. So it didn't work. And by the way, every attempt at electoral reform in Israel has failed. Even, in a traumatizing kind of way. Israel has not recovered from its direct elections for prime minister that it did, hoping that it would make Israelis feel that they were better represented. And so it was in play in the elections in 1996, 1999, and 2001. And in the 1996 election, you had parties who said, why vote for the two larger parties? You can vote for them for prime minister on one ballot and then vote for us on the other ballot. The third wave party said it's like putting bread in your pita. Why put bread in your pita when you can put something tasty in your pita? Vote for us. And the two larger parties were weakened, and since then, the Likud went down to 12 seats at one point, and Labor went down to almost nothing. That didn't work. And now, and the other attempt at electoral reform, the best attempt that there was when Ehud Olmert was the prime minister. There was an attempt in the Knesset Law Committee to pass a bill that would have made there be half the Knesset elected in direct elections with constituencies. Like you have in the House of Representatives over here. It would have been half and half, like the Bundestag in Germany. And like the last election for the Palestinian parliament in January 2006 was that way too. So our models would be the Germans and the Palestinians, right? And 90 members of Knesset were in favor of this reform. You'd think 90 out of 120 would be enough to pass. But not by law, but by tradition. You do not do electoral reforms that change the basic laws, the bills that are the forerunner to a constitution that may never be written without the support of all the parties in the governing coalition. And because the ultra-Orthodox are part of the coalition and they like the current system, the minority defeated the overwhelming majority and the reform was born.
All right, I'm gonna reduce the length. It's a long question. I'm gonna reduce it a little bit. Can you comment on the shift as presented by commentators of the Israeli electorate toward the right over the last 10 years? And how it shift to the right, the point to the left is largely collapsed. Is this connected to your argument that kind of things are, that far right push is kind of inaccurate, overblown?
Yeah, it's not the far right, it's the right. I mean, the center right has gained a lot of support. People feel more comfortable with its point of view. Right now, there's no Palestinian leader anyway to make peace with. And perhaps, depending on what happens in Palestinian politics, that could change overnight. I mean, a lot depends here on Palestinian politics that I didn't bring up here tonight because it wasn't the topic, but let's do quickly the Palestinian politics. 101, they have not had elections since January 2005 for president and since January 2006 for parliament. And so Mahmoud Abbas is in his 18th year of a 4-year term. He is 87 years old now. He has smoked 2 packs a day every day for more than 70 years. He's a wonder of medical science that he is still alive today. And he has not appointed a successor. And because of that, when he passes away, and he should live a long life, well, when he passes away, there will be chaos in the Palestinian Authority. There will not be civil war, but there will be chaos. Why will there not be civil war? I asked Khalid, the brilliant Palestinian correspondent of the Jerusalem Post. He said because Israel controls the passageways between towns in the West Bank, and to have a civil war, you have to be able to go from town to town to kill people, and you cannot go from town to town to kill people when Israel's there, and we won't let it happen. Fascinating answer. And so what some would call the occupation saves lives. It not only helps the Palestinians out tremendously economically day in and day out, every day, but it also saves lives in the event of a Palestinian power struggle that is inevitable. So after he's replaced, if there's someone there who we could talk to, that will reinvigorate the left. There's no doubt about it. They'll have a reason to exist right now. What are they going to talk about? Making peace with whom? So it's not even a fair fight to say. But if you start seeing an Israeli government, you know, loading Arabs on trains, then I'll know that all these guys are saying it right, and I was wrong. I'll come here and I'll say, oh, they were right, I was wrong. I don't expect that to happen.
Back to the room, Tammy?
Thank you for getting rid of all these awful reporters that do harm to us. But with so much social media opportunity and so many outlets for social media, aren't they just gonna continue to show up in other places?
Okay, so that's why day one of my job, I expanded what we do from covering the mainstream media that we've been covering for 20 years to also covering social media. We are highlighting to the world when there are things that are outrageous in social media too now. And that's why we need your help, because there's so much to be done. You know, we push above our weight. We look like we're so big at Honest Reporting because of what we've accomplished in recent weeks, but we have only 3 writers and we have only 1 person covering social media. We need to change that. That's why much of this tour that I'm on is a fundraising tour. And I've been saying you give to FIDF in the military battlefield, that's great. Well, if you give us a second social media person, then it's like a tank for the media war that we desperately need. I need a social media person, a PR person, because I don't know how to do that when we have successes. And I apparently need a security guard. And so social media, everybody helps, though, is the advantage that we encourage our readers to send us things that they see that are outrageous on mainstream and social media. To action@honestreporting.com. And we're constantly getting recommendations for articles from people all around the world. And so I mean, it's harder to play this game when 3/4 of my audience is on Zoom, or 5/6 or some other math that's out there that
Over 50.
I learned about anyway. So but among the people who merited to come to Park Heights JCC, how many of you are on Facebook? Pretty much all of you. Almost all of you. Good for you. How many of you are on Twitter? About half. How many of you are on Instagram? About half. How many of you are on Telegram? Telegram, great source of news. 3 of us. Okay. How many of you are on LinkedIn? LinkedIn counts. Almost all of you. Interesting. How many of you are on TikTok? Only 3. How many of you are on Snapchat? 4, 5. Why are you on Snapchat, Taryn?
It used to be something I could like monitor my children. That's how I got on Instagram.
Okay, but now you like it.
Yeah, well, I don't share, but I intake.
Okay. So all of you who you're all on one form of social media or another, and you're all journalists. Yeah, I'm the only one who gets paid for it, but you're all journalists. You're all part of the effort to monitor what's going on over there. The slogan of the Israeli water authorities, "Chaval Kotim Pa," every drop matters. And I strongly believe that everyone plays their part. And there are flyers for Honest Reporting in purple over there. And I don't know how to ask for money like the people in this building do so well. So, but if people want to give me anything, I'm here. Yeah, yes, sir.
How does the growth of the Arab populations, both total and in the state of Israel, affect outcomes if things don't change dramatically?
The growth of the Arab population? You're talking about Israeli Arab citizens, not about Palestinians.
Pardon?
Talking only about Israeli Arab citizens, not Palestinians.
Yes, well, I'm wondering about both. If you include the Arabs in Palestine and Israel, or just in Israel, they are both, I believe, growing population. They are not growing relative to Israel.
No, what's going on is, I'll talk to the mic. The question is about demography. And there are demographic trends going on in Israel right now that are fascinating. First of all, Israeli Jews are the fastest growing group in any Western nation because they have more children, secular, not even counting the Orthodox. Secular Israelis have more children than secular people in any Western nation because we're a country that puts a lot of value on children and family being more important than work, and I kind of like it that way. But there's another trend that goes on around the world that is not passed over the Palestinians or the Israeli Arabs, which is urbanization makes you have fewer kids. And it's not racism or anything we put in the water or whatever. Palestinians and Israeli Arabs are becoming more developed technologically and economically, and that makes them move away from farms and move more to cities. And when you live in cities, then you have less place to put children and you make less of them. So their numbers are not going up. But if Israel did decide to annex large swaths of the West Bank, where you have hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, then that would be something that we would have to take into account when we have elections. But Israeli Arab citizens, their numbers are not going up fast relatively.
Take the last question from online.
So online, there's a question that speaks to what you were just talking about a moment ago about kind of the fight on campus and the fight. And the question is kind of, why are you separating the fight on, in your comments, you separated the fight on campus with the fight in the media, social media as separate battles? Aren't they kind of one battle? I mean, there's so much of what's going on campus is happening on the social media, isn't it?
I think if there's a cause and effect. I really do. I think that if we received better treatment in the media, then it wouldn't be so hard for our kids at the campuses. They are the victims of the news. If this Jabalia thing would have blown out of control with Israel killing kids, it would have made things a lot harder when the kids got to school on the campus a couple of weeks later. But it didn't, because we didn't do it. Because we admitted we didn't do it. Well, what if it would have taken till November? Then it would have already looked bad. And the kids on campus would be paying the price. Shimon Peres once said that we don't need PR, we just need the right policies and the world will understand. He admitted later that he was wrong. And so I truly believe that getting things right on the media battlefield helps us win on the military battlefield, and it helps make it easier on college campuses, though obviously still hard. And that's why I encourage parents to do a lot of research before they decide which lines then to send their kids to. I strongly recommend that the best decision is to send your kids to colleges in Israel. It's 10,000 shekels a month instead of Johns Hopkins is up to more than $80,000 a year, isn't it? So $80,000 a year, 10,000 shekels, $3,000 a year. It's a very tough choice for parents. The $80,000 a year comes with harassment for being Jewish.
There's no airfare though.
It's true. There's parking. And you know what? I understand people want to hug their kids, but you can see them on the WhatsApp video anyway nowadays, and they don't really hug you anyway. So might as well put them where they're safe. That's my recommendation. Anyway, is that really the last question?
Last question from Zoom.
Does anyone else in the room have?
Hi, I'm Stephanie. I was curious, what voting, pushing people to go vote and dealing with people in the periphery, people of different socioeconomic statuses who might have alternative jobs. How is that impacted in Israel, and how is that, I'm gonna use the word created as an equal opportunity for everyone to vote?
Yeah, so the question is about voting efforts, getting people out to vote, because we do have to get out from work to vote.
But everyone of
yeah.
all different socioeconomic
Yeah.
status?
Yeah, it's illegal to make you vote on election day, except if you work for the Jerusalem Post. Where I had to always work harder than everybody else on election day and all night. It's not compulsory to vote like it is in Australia. They didn't really get it right last time, it seems. We do strongly encourage people to vote. It's like a negative thing if you don't vote. It's like a statement, it really is. And the periphery, though, it's interesting that you point out. So the north and the south, that is the base of the Likud. And the last 4 elections, Netanyahu was prime minister. So if they wanted him to be prime minister, they didn't have to vote. Having another election wasn't a disaster for them because he was still prime minister. This election is different. They need to actively do something to get Netanyahu back in power. And that's what he's been saying, this tour of the periphery, he's been all around north and south, just in Kiryat Shmona and Sfat the other day. And telling people this, and that will also help decide the election, the Arab turnout and the Likud voters who in the past have been complacent and felt they didn't really need to go out and vote. It's gonna be fascinating. Anything can happen, and in Israeli politics, it's always exciting. And I guess following me on Twitter, Gil Hoffman, I'm telling people what's going on. So I want to thank you for inviting me here to speak to the nice people here, wherever they are and home. I want to thank Major League Baseball for not having a game tonight. You should, if you are Israeli citizens, you can still get on that plane and have an impact on the election. Thank you, and vote here too.
Thank you so much, Gil Hoffman. This was such an amazing insight into the upcoming election week. Thank you so much for sharing your candid and insightful thoughts with us. If you would like to continue the conversation, I'm excited to announce that the Insight Israel Forum will be having a follow-up series over Zoom, and everyone is invited to join on November 9th and 10th at noon Eastern Standard Time over Zoom. We will gather to look at the why behind what makes the Israeli democratic process so unique historically, socially, and what do the results tell us about Israeli society today. So bring your questions, bring your reflections from this event, and following the election, we will debrief together through the Insight Israel Forum, and more details to come. Thank you so much. Thank you again to the BJC and the Insight Israel Forum for partnering for this event. And good night, everyone.
You? I am.